Back to Saturday night on BBC Two, which continues now with a preview of the RAC Rally, and the first of our nightly reports from Top Gear.
Good evening, and let's start this evening's programme with a sort of mini quiz. What event in this country has upwards of 2 million spectators, 11,000 marshals, 280 timekeepers, 212 doctors, and takes 5 days to complete? Well, there's really only one answer, and it's the Lombard RAC Rally. 2,000 miles of rough, tough motoring around this country, watched by millions of viewers from all over the world, and this year could be one of the toughest ever because many more of those miles this year will be through Britain's difficult, unmapped, unmarked forest stages, often at night. And I see the weather, as if on cue, is for rough and wet and cold and windy weather for the next few days. I hope our film crews out on the road have taken their wellies with them. And we're based here in Chester, the starting point and control centre for the rally, pulling together each night's coverage over the next 5 days. But to get some sort of feel of what these rally crews are in for, I strapped myself in alongside Malcolm Wilson, driving Top Gear's own entry.
For most people, this is what rallying is all about. Men strapped in metal boxes, hurtling at breakneck speed, down impossibly winding and twisting paths. Some are always at night, some are always in the rain or the snow, mud and slush flying everywhere, getting impossibly sideways in gravel, and then recovering really by the skin of their teeth. And always with that powerful fascination, would I ever dare to do this?
Well, having changed my trousers, rallying is of course about that and much more besides. But let's start by getting the facts of the RAC Rally straight. It covers 2,000 miles all over England and Scotland and Wales, starting and finishing here in Chester, and goes on more or less continuously night and day for 5 days. But for most of that time, the cars aren't driven in anger, as it were. They have to observe the legal speed limits. It's in these special stages that both cars and drivers are pushed to their very limits. There are 50 of them, totalling 550 miles, most of them in forest tracks and fire breaks and so on, very narrow, winding and twisty, covered in mud and gravel, very steep-sided, lots of rocks and trees ready to leap out in front of the cars. And what distinguishes the RAC Rally from other international events is that the drivers aren't allowed to practice on these special stages. They're not allowed to learn their secrets and draw up pace notes, as they're called, to guide them around those twisting hairpins. It's all supposed to come as a pretty nasty shock to them. And that's the kind of feature that has made the RAC Rally a classic, drawing the best of the international teams and drivers here from all over the world. Now, to give you a marker to follow in this year's event, we've got our own Top Gear BBC Two entry, an Audi Quattro, the vehicle that won last year's RAC Rally, driven by Malcolm Wilson, who is one of Britain's brightest and most up-and-coming drivers, the sort of guy who can get in amongst the Scandinavians, and his co-driver is Nigel Harris. Malcolm, I've been talking about going sideways in gravel, but has the four-wheel drive technology changed all that?
I don't think so, really. Obviously, different drivers have different techniques, but I haven't changed. I find it very similar to a conventional car. It's the fact that I have the difficulty with is the turbo lag. That is the biggest area where it's quite difficult to sort of compensate and get the balance of power and braking at the same time. And it makes it even more difficult in really tight corners.
You mean the lag between putting your foot down on the accelerator and taking off again, and the turbo coming in and going out again?
That's right. You know, it can be very inconsistent, and to get the balance right it requires a lot of practice, and it's something that takes quite a lot of time.
Are there particular things about certain stages that you always remember? I mean, certain nasty bends you come to?
Oh, it's funny that one of the last rallies that we did, we discussed there was a bad place in the Kielder Forest complex, and we actually knew about this place before we went into it. And believe it or not, it was in dark. Obviously, the last time we were in daylight. But about 10 cars ended up down this particular fire break, and we actually knew about it before the start, so I mean it can still happen.
You still couldn't compensate?
Not really. I mean, something like that can still catch you out, obviously, the speeds that you're going.
What do you think it's going to take to really get amongst the Scandinavians?
Well, I think on a British event, the the chances are quite good now. If you're doing, as I said, the British Championship, it does give you a footing to sort of build on, and I think if you get the British drivers get the right car, there's every possibility it could happen.
I mean, to give me some idea, how much sort of practicing and rallying will you do in a year? How many days will you do?
Probably somewhere around about 15, 20 days rallying, and you know, very little practice really in that time.
Do you think you're going to take more than that?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think, you know, a good car, and obviously you've got to have a lot of reliability on the RAC. It's a very long event.
How are you looking actually forward to the RAC this year, this car?
Very, very much so. It's very nice to be in a competitive car again that's of equal with the works teams. It's very encouraging.
Well, there'll be lots of eyes on you, Malcolm. Thank you very much. Well, Malcolm Wilson's co-driver is Nigel Harris. Nigel, for the benefit of the uninitiated, what is the co-driver's job, essentially?
Well, to keep him on the straight and narrow. Obviously the bits between the stages are fairly straightforward, but essentially on the stages it's a question of giving him the information about any corner that's coming up just a split second before he needs it, so that his brain's got time to react to it, and he can either, if the corner's going to tighten, he can just slow it down and be ready for it, or if it's going to open, then he can go through faster than he thinks he can.
What do they mean when they say your job is office management? Is that keeping the car clean, or is that making sure the petrol tank is full?
Give a damn what happens to the state of the car inside. No, it's essentially keeping the petrol tank full, making sure we've got the right width of wheel inside the right tyres, the right size of tyre, the right compound of tyre, and making sure that those tyres and the choice is available at all the relevant service areas as and when we need them.
Is there a lot of pressure on because the RAC Rally is so long?
Very much so, yes. It's what, 5-day event. It's obviously going to be a fair amount of pressure, but I think that's largely due to the fact that we spend 2 nights out of bed. And it gets very tiring on the motorway sections. Obviously between the stages, when you're sort of needling for the odd second here and there with your opponents in front and behind of you, that's no problem, but on the motorway bits in between them, dear me.
So fatigue is a real problem, is it?
It certainly is, yeah. It certainly is.
How much preparation have you done before the rally?
Well, I've got my normal job selling houses in Sheffield, and I've been doing that obviously this week, but coming home, working right through till I haven't been to bed before 1 o'clock this week.
So this is a part-time job for you, isn't it?
Very much so, yes.
What's the worst bit of all for you? I mean, is it now before the start, or is it during one of the particular stages?
I enjoy the stages. They're quite, in terms of pressure, worry and that sort of thing, they're the enjoyment part. I think the worst bit on this event is going to come in Yorkshire, making sure all those tyres are available, ready when we need them.
Nigel, I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Well, there we are, what goes on inside a rally car from 2 of the inmates. Now, this jamboree that's going on at the moment is part of the essential ritual of rallying. It's called the scrutineering process. Every one of the 150 entries into the RAC Lombard Rally, whether it's a private one-off entry prepared in someone's back garden garage, or a fully blown crack manufacturer-prepared car driven by one of the rallying aces, has to go under the eyes of the scrutineers. They're looking really for 3 main things. One is the basic safety pack. Every car has to have a certain minimum amount of safety equipment. Anti-roll bars, fireproof bulkheads, a fire extinguisher, and of course safety harnesses and driver's crash helmets. Then they're looking at the number of lights the car carries, because each class in the rally has a maximum number of lights. Lights, of course, being a critical factor, critical winning factor in a rally, much of which takes place at night. These lights have a throw of several hundred yards. They can be skewed to look round forest corners or into the ditches at the side of the road, so they examine and count the number of lights carried on the front of the car. Then they're looking at a basic identification of the car, because works teams these days can change just about everything on the car in a matter of minutes. They have to make sure the car that finishes the rally bears some resemblance to the car that started it. So they mark the engine block and the chassis with a special fluorescent paint. It's checked at several stages during the rally and again at the finish if the car happens to finish. Because, of course, of the 150 cars that go through here today, only 50 or 60 will actually reach the finishing line. And if it's among the leaders, they actually strip the engine down to make sure it comes up to the special specification for that car's entry. Let's look now at some of the drivers, the top drivers, who are likely to be amongst the winners when they cross that finishing line. Well, a hot tip for this year's race is Ari Vatanen, the Finnish driver. He's driving the remarkably quick Peugeot 205 Turbo, mid-engine car, 4-wheel drive. It's really started to win right from the beginning of its career. Driving it, he's already won the Finnish Thousand Lakes Rally and the San Remo Rally in Italy. So it looks as if this could be Ari's lucky year in RAC, where he's never really had much luck in the past. But he's got a very tough battle on his hand with the other flying Finn, Hannu Mikkola. Now, Hannu is, in a sense, a sort of Bjorn Borg of the RAC Rally. The last 6 years, he's had 4 wins and 2 seconds. He's driving the truly remarkable Audi Quattro, which is the most successful rally car of all time, with 100 major wins in just 4 years of rallying. So a very tough combination to beat. And he only has to finish, really, among the front runners in this year's rally for Audi to make a clean sweep. It's got the Manufacturers' Championship and the first in the Drivers' Championship. He would make up the second in the Drivers' Championship. But talking of flying Finns, what about the flying Scot, Jimmy McRae, who's already this year's British Open champion?
I think the whole rally's got to be treated with some respect, because there's tough sections in each day or each night. But I think obviously the sting in the tail coming up through Wales the last night, after you've been already done 3 or 4 days rallying and you're out of bed for a second night, I think that's going to be quite tough.
Do you get very tired?
As long as the rally keeps going, you don't get so tired. As long as the adrenaline's going, you're all right. But it's when you maybe come out of a group of stages and you have a long road sections, that's really when the tiredness catches up.
And let's not forget that first lady of rallying, Michèle Mouton, the French driver. She's had 2 goes at the RAC Rally so far. She had to retire twice with mechanical trouble. She was second in 1982, but she's driving the amazing Audi Sport Quattro, 500 brake horsepower under the bonnet. That's 150 brake horsepower more than Hannu's car. And if she can handle that sort of power, and I'm told she's a very tough lady indeed, and there's any sort of break in the weather, a bit of snow perhaps, or a lot of rain, then she could very well be right in there among the front runners. Let's finish perhaps with a look at Tony Pond, immensely popular, bringing Rover back into rallying with the Vitesse with 300 brake horsepower. Let's have a brief look indeed at a moment that I'm sure Tony Pond won't happen again this year, but gives you an indication of the kinds of ups and downs of rallying. Let's use that to end the programme. See you again tomorrow after the end of the first day's rally.
I used to think you was a real swell guy till you put me right. 100 yards, hairpin left. Goes right, hairpin right, caution.
My mother won't let me go rallying if she sees this on TV.
No, my mum won't either. She'll say, that's it. I knew it was dangerous. I had a bit of a problem with the fog lights, and couldn't see around corners very well. But that wasn't the real problem, I shouldn't think. And then the arrows sort of point that way into this fire break. So, I mean, always follow the arrows, don't I? This is where I end up.
Were you injured?
Sorry?
This is not a laughing matter, is it?
Well, you've got to laugh or you'd cry, wouldn't you? And I don't like crying. So, I mean, I must laugh about it.
Well, I take it all this damage wasn't done when you came off the road?
No, no. Somebody else came off and landed on top of us, you see.
Who?
Oh, another escort, one of the back numbers. That's where it's quite a bad place. Most people would have been off, I should think. I mean, we waved them down and they were all just sort of just on the edge here, and one eventually landed on top. Foreign chappie.
One of the worst problems is when you're upside down. When you undo the seatbelts, you fall on your head.
And did this happen?
No, not to me, because that's the 20th time I've been upside down, and I'm good at it now.
Keep going. Go on, keep going. Keep going. That's it.
That's close. Now we can just drag it up. Get this big rock.
It's going. Right hand rock, Phil. Right hand. Too much. That's it, you got it.
I mean, if somebody turned around to me and said, there's no way you're ever going to win a rally, pack it up, forget it, and then I was convinced of that, I would stop. It's quite a difficult way to earn a living.